Iguodala. Iguodala to Curry, back to Iguodala, up for the layup. Oh, blocked by James. Curry, one-on-one. Irving puts it up. It's good. Kyrie Irving from downtown. The three, steps back, crossover, puts up a three. Rebound James. Second. It's over. It's over. Cleveland is the city of champions once again. The Cavaliers are NBA champions.
Cleveland! This is for you!
What's up, Cavs fans? Welcome to another edition of the Block the Shot Stop. Here with Tim Daniel. I am Kevin Lynch. And Tim, I'm bummed we're not here to talk about a Cavs basketball game tonight.
Yeah, right before we started recording, I looked at the score of the Knicks-Celtics game and went, son of a bitch.
I know. So yeah, we are. There obviously is no Cavs game tonight, which we were heartbroken about. But we wanted to do an episode kind of like just recapping what happened against the Pacers. We're not going to go all the way into the series and rehash any horrible memories that we've made in the last couple of weeks, but more so like, why did this happen and what can they do to avoid it? Like, all of next year is going to be, obviously you want to put the right team in place, have a good regular season, but everything about next year is going to be building to this moment to be able to respond better in a tough playoff series like this. And so we basically wanted to start planting some of the seeds around what is it that we think went wrong or the most wrong, and how can we start, literally today building so that we don't have the same just sinking feeling of a team that overachieves so much in the regular season, underachieves so much in the playoffs. So Tim, I'll bring you in there. Let's start broad. Like, what do you think is the biggest reason the Cavs lost the series the way they did?
They didn't make shots, Kevin.
That's a good one.
I feel like that's a nice start. For being what ended up being the number 2 offensive rating in NBA history for a regular season offense, to be the worst 3-point shooting team in the postseason is an insane drop off. And it's one thing that you give credit to the Pacers. I thought the Pacers defense was excellent in the series for sure. They miss a lot of wide open shots. They miss a lot of shots that they were hitting all year. And it wasn't just the Mitchells and the Garlands. It was Max Strus having an over game as a starter in the series. It was Sam Merrill, who had a game that wasn't necessarily the Sam Merrill-esque. It was DeAndre Hunter. I mean, it went down the list. Ty Jerome, we obviously know, had a terrible series. I still think I would have gone to him a little earlier in game 5 than they did. But that's a different conversation. But I think step one is simply put, Indiana hit their shots, and it was like the shots they were hitting were shots you not expect them to hit, and Cleveland was not hitting shots you do expect them to hit on a consistent basis that they've hit all year. And I think just kind of at some point, laws of averages kind of stepped in and kind of gave Indiana that big advantage.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I kind of want to tag on one thing to it. Yes, they did not shoot the ball as well as you would expect them to. They also didn't get as good a quality of shots as you would expect them to, as they did all year. They had the last game of their season, game 5. The Cavs averaged almost 30 assists a game this season. They had 10 assists in game 5. They averaged 20 assists for that Indiana series. So, it's all related, right? Like, your assists don't rack up if you're not making shots, but also, you don't make as many shots when the shots aren't as high quality. So I thought the ball movement really stagnated in the series. I think, they were taking, they weren't taking advantage of opportunities to get easier shots, particularly 100%. Working it inside to the 2 big guys, which we're going to discuss. So yeah, I mean, while I do agree some of it's law of averages, I think some of it's quality of play. And I think, and then the quality of the offense they ran, which they ran the best offense in the NBA all season. Statistically, in the second round, they're like the worst or second worst offense of the 8 teams remaining.
Yeah, it was pretty brutal. So that definitely jumps out. The size, I know this is something that always comes back to it, and it's something we're going to hear for a long time, but just the size of their 3 leading ball handlers compared to Indiana's obviously jumps out. So Tyrese Halliburton's obviously incredibly long and, super and tall. Like he's not Penny Hardaway, but he's got like a similar comp to Penny Hardaway as far as like body size, and I don't know, he might be Penny Hardaway. I just, that's my favorite player of all time. So I don't like.
I don't know if I've heard that one before. That's a good comp.
Yeah, I just have a hard time throwing that name out there because he's my favorite player ever. But just kind of seeing, Halliburton has that innate ability to shoot from long range. He's long, he's lanky, he's himself again, which he was not for quite a bit of the first probably 35, 40 games of the year. And just that part, Mathurin obviously had that, I know everyone's mad at him now, but he was awesome in the series. I mean, can't take it away from Andrew Nembhard was great in the series. Just the size that it just kind of really disrupted Cleveland for sure. And kind of saw, so you and I were talking about this right before we came on air. On average, when a Cleveland ball head was bringing the ball up the court, he ended up with like a 3-quarter press at times, and they were picking them up on average at 53 feet from the basket.
Yeah, and you're kind of leading into my big thing, so we might as well just go there. I agree with everything you're saying. I think it's just the physicality of the Pacers and the intensity they play with, and how comfortable they are within that intensity. Where the Cavs never looked comfortable when the much of that series was intense. I mentioned on the show after Game 5, like I hate Kendrick Perkins. I say that every chance I get. And again, he's saying like the Cavs aren't tough enough, they're not physical enough. Nice guys don't win championships. I think that is incorrect. I don't think Jared Allen needs to turn into Draymond Green and start getting flagrant fouls, knocking people over, and being out of character. I think that would not help the Cavs. What I do think is that the Cavs, unfortunately, don't play through physicality like, a lot of NBA championship kind of teams and players have in the past. I think the best and most obvious example of a non-physical player who plays through physicality so well is Steph Curry. Like Steph Curry is not knocking people over. He's not,
he's getting knocked over. Actually.
Yeah. But like that guy, he might get fouled more off the ball, like, than anybody, at least outside the paint, than anybody in basketball. He just keeps doing his thing. He keeps running, keeps running, keeps going through screens, like, says a quick thing to the ref and then keeps going and plays through all of that. And I don't think this Cavs team does. The physicality just rattles them. It rattles them. It rattles them before they even cross half court because of what you're saying, because they're getting picked up and they're getting, annoyed and worn down in the backcourt, just getting the ball up. And they, I don't know what the answer to that is, and we'll get into it. But like, I think this team has to learn how to play through other teams' physicality and succeed and excel through physicality, because they're going to face physicality every single playoff series against a good team.
Yeah, and let's be honest. We know that this team we know how they laid down, but we know that next year we're probably having the same conversation about how good they are in the regular season again. We're probably talking about the fact that, like, I would bet that the betting sites are probably going to have them in the top 5 in odds for the NBA championship next year. So and you know what? No one's going to care. No one's going to care.
No, I mean, that is the stage that they're at with this team.
For sure.
It's always taking steps, right? And they've taken a step each of like the last opportunities, in the past 3 years since they got Donovan Mitchell. Like whether it's, go from a non-playoff team to making the play-in to like making the playoff series to winning a playoff series and then this year they made a giant leap in the regular season and they stagnated in the playoffs. They finished literally exactly where they did last year, second round, 4-1 defeat. And so then it's when you stagnate, when you're not moving forward anymore, that kind of the questions arise, and people they'll wait through the regular season. Not to say we won't all watch and enjoy the regular season, but we're not going to be able to enjoy the regular season as much next year because we're just going to be, waiting on pins and needles for the playoffs to see how they can, play differently, which is a little bit unfortunate, but I think it's reality.
Yeah, especially because next year the East is going to be very wide open.
Oh, God. We might be able to make the playoffs. We get throw together a block shot stop team, and
right.
We get in the East play-in, I think.
Yeah, you, Skyler, some of our people that hung out with us at Southern Tier in March.
Yeah. We got couple of the regulars in the chat. Yeah, we'll put a team together.
I call lead ball handler. So
yeah, okay, all right. But yeah, so I think that is something they need to figure out. I think Mitchell plays through physicality in a lot of ways, but it still can bother him in some ways.
That's why they lost game 2.
Yeah, and it's okay. There's probably no problem with how Mitchell handles physicality if he wasn't playing next to guys who struggled even more with it, right? Like you everybody on your team's not going to sell every single thing on a basketball court. But I do think, as well as this team complemented each other when they were playing the beautiful game in the regular season, the ball movement, the passing, that everybody gets a taste, playing 10, 11, 12 guys every night. When the chips went down and, they all kind of got exposed with the same flaws, unfortunately. And that's something, whether it's, guys growing and changing within themselves, whether that's, for whatever they can do to bring in some like additional personnel to try and fill that gap. That's, to me, that's the biggest thing, is how do they learn to not let playoff physicality and intensity bother them?
You know what I would do is I would go back and watch the 2 Memphis games this year. Because that was when their attitude was where it needed to be.
Yeah.
Those 2 games, like, Memphis is a very physical team. Memphis, like, tried to, they talked trash to them. They got in their faces, and they laughed it off, and they just took it back to them, and they won both games by pretty insurmountable amounts. I know there's a significant difference in Memphis and Indiana. Don't get me wrong. But, Orlando even. I mean, that last game, I know Orlando beat them, but how many times we just see they're just jawing and getting really physical and bumping, and Ty Jerome and Paolo Banchero are fighting with each other. And I was like, yeah, this is what the playoffs are like, guys. And you've done this before. So why can't you do this in May? What is it about May that really just cuts you guys off? And you mentioned the last playoff series last year. You can understand that, right? They lost to the champs. I don't think they're going to lose to the champs this time around, but I do think the Pacers will be in the finals. I do think they'll beat the Knicks.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing is that kind of goes along with this, and I hesitate to say this because nobody likes hearing this about themselves or their favorite athletes or whatever, but the Pacers had way more will in this
for sure
than the Cavs did. The Pacers refused to give the Cavs advantageous matchups. When they would send Mitchell through double high screens, Nesmith or Nembhard fought through both of them and stayed on Mitchell. When it was the other way and Halliburton was taking those 2 screens, the Cavs just gave up and gave him the mismatch that they were hunting. That all that action happening 40 feet away from the basket, shouldn't dictate how the series is going, but it did. It's the fact that the Cavs weren't willing to kind of rise to that, intensity and show their will. And I am staying on Tyrese. Max Scherzer, I'm staying on Tyrese Halliburton. You're going to have to take out my legs to get me off of him. And they didn't do that. And my God, do Nesmith and Nembhard do that. They're 2 of the most impressive perimeter defenders, particularly in the playoffs, that I've seen in a long time. I left. I know I talked about a few times in the play. I talked about, those guys are absolute dogs, and in the best way. And so anyway, with that, you and I, we both had let's come up with a couple of things as far as what needs to change for next year. And we had one in common, and that was how they use Evan Mobley. So why don't I let you start, and then I'll come in on kind of Mobley in this series and what we need to see from him next year.
So the conversation you and I kind of had to kind of peel the curtain back a little bit is, why wasn't he getting more touches? And necessarily not the game plan. It's who is at fault for this case. And I think you and I came to the conclusion from Mike just our bantering about it, is that everyone is.
Yeah.
It's not just yes, the coaching staff does need to figure out how to get Evan Mobley the ball. Yes, his teammates need to figure out how to get him in advantageous matchups. But also Evan Mobley needs to get the ball. He needs to want the ball. In this series, he did not have a single game where he had more than 13 shot attempts. In this series, he shot 53% from the floor, 43% from 3, 82% from the line. he was like statistically really good.
Mm-hmm.
And he could have been significantly better than the good numbers he put up. And that's what's scary about it. Is, and like we talk about this all the time, this isn't, everyone knows how my feelings for Evan Mobley as a player. I think the world of him. I think he's going to be an all NBA talent for a long time, but this is where he takes that step. This is where he gets to that, everyone kind of compares him to Giannis and this guy and that guy. And it's like, this is where he becomes Giannis. He's never going to be the freak of nature that Giannis is by any means, but not only that, but in the fast break, I understand the Pacers hit a lot of shots, but why is he not doing the trailer again? What happened to that? That was like the most beautiful thing they did in transition was Mobley bringing the ball towards the trailer and having the two guards inside. That didn't happen. Do you recall that happening once in the series?
No, and we will mention it. We haven't mentioned it yet, but like obviously injuries played a factor in this. So like I think Tim and I are on the same page that we fully admit that injuries played a factor. We don't think injuries cost in this series.
Correct.
So yeah. So, but you could say for little intricacies in the game like that, like getting out on the fast break, like how much did his ankle injury impact him on that and everything to play at top speed? I would buy that as a thing, but even when he is healthy, and I wanted to add on to what you said, he didn't take 13 shot attempts in either of the 2 playoff series. In any game out of the 8, he played 8 of the 9 playoff games. He missed game 2 against the Pacers. He did not take more than 13 shot attempts in either series. And you could say they're 2 polar opposite series, right? They dominated Miami in a sweep and they got worked pretty good by the Pacers. His stats are almost identical in both.
Yeah.
Like you would think there got to be some kind of difference. So it's kind of like no matter how the game goes, Evan Mobley's just going to put up 17 and 8. And that's what you're going to get in the playoffs on super efficient shooting, but like not as much. Like he's taking, he took 10 and a half shots in the first round. He took just over 11 in the second round. So he averaged 11 shot attempts, less than 11 shot attempts in 8 playoff games. And like to your point, all the numbers are great. He shot over 66% on 2-pointers in the playoffs. He shot over 45% on threes if you combine all the playoffs together. His true shooting would have been one of the top in the league if it was, a regular season. Same thing with effective field goal. Like he was so incredibly effective. It seemed like without even getting set up or anything. And like you said, I think you always start with the player. Like, if you have, the strongest of wills, you're going to go get the ball, and then a short step down from that is Kenny and the coaching staff. Like if you have a guy who is this effective when you get him in positions to score and you don't do it more, that's on you. And then,
Correct.
and it's partly, at least in small part, a full Cavs team problem because I didn't see anybody on the Cavs going up to Evan and like demanding him get in the post or give him the ball and clear everyone out and like kind of force him to do it like you would want him to. Be like, look, we're struggling in a lot of areas. You're the area where you scoring the basketball is our best thing right now, like our most effective thing. And so, I do think it's on everybody, and they just got to convince Evan, like, no matter what, you're taking 18 shots tonight. No matter what, you're taking 20 shots. If you miss every single one, you're taking 20 shots tonight. Like, because the biggest thing holding him back a year or two ago was some skill development stuff, right? Like particularly be able to shoot threes, put the ball on the floor more effectively. He's done all that. Incredible skill development.
Leaps and bounds.
Yeah. Right. The next thing for him is to, just increase his, leadership and his wants to and honestly his recognition that he is one of the best players in basketball. I'm one of the best players in basketball. I need you to give me the ball all the time. And then when I'm done scoring, I'll give it to you. Like he's just in
that series, if you're like line both teams up and you're like an old pickup game and you're doing a draft, the Cavs had 2 of the top 3 guys you're picking on your team in that series.
Yeah.
And one of them was out there playing with one leg, basically. So I have all the respect in the world for everything Donovan did. The other's Tyrese Halliburton. We obviously know what he did. He was the man. And the others have Mobley.
Yeah.
And Evan Mobley needs to believe that he's on those guys' levels. I think he does, but I think it's time that he knows. I think he knows too. He's gonna have to prove it.
Yeah. No, for sure. I couldn't agree more. And the last thing, well, we talk about like the playing through physicality and everything. I went back and I looked, I looked at like NBA champions and really successful NBA teams and NBA players and like other good examples besides the most obvious, Steph Curry. I mean, you could even argue Nikola Jokic isn't a super physical player, but he's the best.
Yeah,
player.
I wouldn't say Tatum is either.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
But like
best.
But
I went back and looked for like reasonable comps for them, and I think the one really good one for Darius Garland, who we haven't mentioned yet, should be going back and watching like Tony Parker playoff tape. How did Tony Parker be so successful for so many years? He was a Finals MVP. He was one of the top 2 or 3 players in that Spurs team ever for over a decade. I don't know if you know this, but until like 2 weeks ago, Tony Parker had the most playoff points by a point guard in NBA history. Like Steph just surpassed him. I mean, in much fewer games, but like, part of that is, accumulation stat, but still like, it's incredible. You think of like the greatest point guards in NBA history. Up until 2 weeks ago, Tony Parker had the most playoff points for a point guard. And I think that him playing in arguably an even more physical era, and being so successful is what I would want like someone like Darius Garland to watch. And then I couldn't find a direct comp for like Evan and Jared, but like the closest thing I could find to a non-physical big guy that was very successful in the playoffs for a long time was like Dirk Nowitzki. And Dirk was never gonna, be accused of being a super physical player, like, a bad boy Piston or something like that. But he played through physicality about as well as, I would say as well as any European player, especially before Giannis, and as successfully as any kind of, big man architect like him. And so those are just a couple of guys I kind of thought of, and I'm like, those are guys that have, you squint a little bit, similar games to the Cavs players, and found a way to be very successful in the playoffs. So I don't know. Do you like those, Tim? Or like, I think I like the Parker Garland one the most, but.
So I do like the Parker Garland one. My Mobley comp in that same stitch is one of Parker's old teammates in Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan wasn't extremely physical. He was just so fundamentally better than you. And in my opinion, is the most underrated basketball player of all time. But that's for another conversation for another podcast. But to me, like, Duncan obviously won finals MVPs, and he is one of the, depending who you talk to, 10, 15 greatest players to ever walk the earth.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying Evan Mobley is going to end up being Tim Duncan by any means, but Duncan wasn't out there like you talked about. He wasn't out there doing Ben Wallace stuff. He was beating Ben Wallace. He wasn't out there doing, Rasheed Wallace stuff. He was beating Rasheed Wallace. Like that's what he did. And so for Mobley, I think Mobley's a better shooter than Tim Duncan. But obviously, like I said, Duncan's one of the greatest to ever do it. So if we're sitting here having conversations about comparing these two to a dynasty 1-4 combo that won a lot of championships, I think we really believe in these guys, right?
Yeah, for sure. The Cavs have the talent to win an NBA championship. I just don't know if they're more than talent goes into it.
For sure.
And I don't know that they have everything they need, right? Yeah. I think they have the talent. I think in some ways they have complementing parts and everything within the roster. I think they have a very good coach, a very good leader on the team. But they're missing some things within that championship formula that they, again, need to figure out how. I mean, they're still a young team. Can they grow into some of that? Is it going to acquire them making another move or two? I know we all know they're going to be in the second apron this summer, and it's going to get tougher to do that, but not impossible. Everybody says second apron, they'll never be able to do anything. There was the most deadline trades in NBA history this year when half the teams were in the second apron. Teams figure it out how to get around that.
I have one name that I'm like dying to be a Cavalier, but
hold it. We're gonna there's gonna be a lot of time for off-season content. We're gonna. I know.
I'm just I'm like dying to like release it. I'm like, okay, not today.
So, and if you have anything else, by all means, but I have one more thing for you, and I purposely didn't tell you this because I wanted your answer off the cuff.
Always love when you do this to me.
Yeah, like, do the Cavs next year, and when I'm talking next year in the playoffs, do they need this regular season version of Donovan Mitchell or the playoff version of Donovan Mitchell? Because you could make it, and while you're thinking, you could make the argument that Mitchell was so, superhero at times in the playoffs, but did that detract from team success? I think in some instances it was necessary for him to do that. In others, like, the team didn't play as well when he was putting as much on his shoulders. So what do you think when I ask you about that?
I think because of the conversation we just had in length about Evan Mobley, you probably need to look more at getting regular season Donovan Mitchell. And that's simply I'm not taking anything away from what Donovan Mitchell in the playoffs. That was amazing. I mean, those first 2 games of the series when like he basically gave them a chance to win by himself, it's stuff that I'll never forget as a Cavs fan. But he can't do it all himself.
I agree with that. I think it was amazing how democratic this Cavaliers team was this year, and that everyone had a really good role. Everyone got a piece of the pie and everything. I think that works well, but I think you need levels on an NBA team, and I think next year Mitchell and Mobley has to meet him there. Has to be the top dogs in this. Yes. And it's not to say I think Jared Allen or Darius Garland or anybody else is a bad player, but I don't think they're on Mobley or Mitchell's level. And I think it needs to be treated as such. I think Mitchell and Mobley need to be the priorities. And then there's a step down, and then there's Allen and Garland. And then, we can go through and rank the order after that. But I think there needs to be a little bit less, of the shared pie. Like, and Mobley and Allen need to start getting the biggest piece of chicken, like, all season and into the playoffs.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Because if you look at, let's just look at the teams that are playing right now that are still alive. I mean, specifically New York, it's Brunson and Cat, and everyone else does their thing. But right. Brunson and Cat are the guys that's the focus.
Right.
There's a reason they went and made the trades they did. In Indiana, I mean, I know they spread the ball out, but it's mostly Siakam and Halliburton. I mean, Miles Turner gets his, obviously, and all those other guys get theirs. But like you said, like Siakam and Halliburton they're dudes. And like on the west side of things too. I mean, in Minnesota, Julius Randle all of a sudden is like shining again. Him and Anthony Edwards look great together.
Yeah.
And then of course, whatever happens in this game 7, which now it looks like Aaron Gordon's out for Denver. But hot take of all those teams, Kev, I like our 2 guys against all those guys.
Skill wise, yeah. But like I told you before we went on, like
absolutely.
Watching that Denver and OKC series, I don't know how many Cavs can compete in that series. And you could see the Thunder are way more skilled than Denver, even with Joker on Denver. But Denver's giving them everything they want, and has, they're taking them to a game 7 when they almost pulled off game 5 in OKC. So,
and they won again, they lost by 40.
Yeah. And so I was kind of watching that series, and I'm like, how many of the Cavs could, with what we saw this year, respond to the intensity of this environment? And if you're being honest, I don't know how many.
One?
I don't know how many fingers you're going to get through on that question.
I would say 2, because I do think Javonte Green is an MFer.
Okay.
Watching him all those
years. We don't know. We didn't see him.
Right. Watching him all those years with the Bulls, like he was a guy who he took it, and like his Celtics years too. I mean, he played in big Celtics series too. Yeah. I do think they got to get more physical. Obviously, and we'll get to that throughout the offseason. But their physical guys can't be their Javonte Greens and Tristan Thompsons. They need to be guys who are going to play. Right.
Yeah, and again, we'll get through all that, but we I don't know, maybe this is more therapy for us than anything, but we at least, again, we it's springtime, almost summer, like we're planting the seeds for next year. We're moving on. Like we want at this point is like, how do we avoid this happening again? Feeling like this happened again, where the team frankly kind of wilted in the moments. this year. So with that, Tim, any more thoughts before I was going to let any more thoughts before I get us out of here?
Yeah, I just want to say real quick, I know that my other obligations had me kind of more a part-time schedule here on this show, but this is where I want to be. And I absolutely love how much this show grew this year and how much fun we had watching this team. And I can't wait for next year already. I'm already like dialing in. I've got my draft. I got my big board for the 2 second rounders, even though I'm pretty sure we're probably going to trade one. Like I'm ready to go. I can't wait to have Cavs basketball again. Summer leagues in a couple months. I'm dead set ready to see Jalen Tyson average 26 a game in summer league. Let's go.
That's a good lead in. And we'll put this on our socials because I'm saying it in the 31st minute of this episode, but we are going to still do a weekly episode in the off season. If there's news with the Cavs, we'll obviously hop on and do a second episode in a week, but we are going to put out episodes every Tuesday throughout the offseason, starting this coming Tuesday. Obviously, we'll discuss any Cavs news. We're going to come up, we'll probably cover a little bit of what happens in the rest of these NBA playoffs, just because it'll be going on. And then once the season's over, we're going to do some fun stuff. I know Tim wants to do some like revisionist drafts within Cavs history. I have a few. I excel in like the creative department, so I have a few ideas I haven't sprung on these guys yet for episodes to do. But we don't want to just disappear till the preseason. So we're going to be still putting out a weekly episode, and we haven't done this yet. But I think I'd love to like start doing a little bit of like mailbox stuff and like getting out, and we encourage people to get in the chat, but people can't always just show up when we ask them to. So maybe get some ideas from all of you of things to talk about and discuss, while we're just waiting till the Cavs tip off again. So for Tim Daniel, for myself, Kevin Lynch, thank you all for tuning in to the Block the Shot to Stop. Please subscribe, rate us 5 stars everywhere you get your podcasts, on YouTube. We greatly appreciate it. We appreciate the whole season, but especially all the growth that we've experienced here lately. So appreciate all of you, and we will see you on Tuesday. So until then, even though it's the off season, Tim, let's do it the same old way. As always,
ride or die, baby. Go Cavs.